Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to hear evidence from the last of the TMO witnesses we're calling in this module. Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, good morning. Members of the panel, good morning to you. I now call Mr. Robert Black, please.
Thank you. Good morning again, Mr. Black. You're going to take the oath, I think.
Yep.
There is a testament, or should be a testament there next to you. Would you take it in your right hand, please, and read the words on the screen?
Okay. I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please sit down. Right. Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Black, good morning and welcome back to the inquiry. We are, as always, very grateful to you for coming here and assisting us with our investigations. Again, some words of introduction. If you could please keep your voice up so that the person who sits to your right can get it down clearly on the transcript, that would be very good. If you can also just don't nod, don't shake your head, you have to say yes or no, as the case may be. We will be taking a break mid-morning, but if you need a break at any other time, please let us know, and we can do that. And again, as before, if you don't understand any of my questions or you would like me to rephrase them, I can do that.
Yeah.
Now, you've given us 4 statements. 2 of those relate to phase 1 of the inquiry and 2 to this phase, phase 2. I'll just put them to you again. Your first phase 1 witness statement, TMO 100489161, 22nd of August 2018. There it is, 3 pages. If we can go to page 3, please. Signature. Is that your signature?
It is.
Thank you. Second witness statement for phase 1, TMO 50888, dated 8th February 2019. Page 35, please. If we can go to that. Is that your signature?
It is.
Thank you. Third witness statement, phase 2, TMO 1004890, 15th of March 2019, page 7. Is that your signature?
It is.
Thank you. And your fourth witness statement, your second phase 2 statement, that is, in relation to aftermath, that's dated the 10th of December 2020. And if we could go, please, to... And that is at TMO 00887150. And if we can go, please, to page 12 in that statement, you'll see a signature. Is that your signature above the date of the 10th of December? Thank you. And have you had the opportunity to read these statements recently?
I have.
And are they true?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now, in the course of these questions, I'm going to be looking with you at your third and fourth statements that you've just deposed to. I want just to ask you 1 or 2 general background matters first. As you've said before, you were the chief executive of the TMO and at the time of the Grenfell Tower fire. Yes?
I was, yes.
And you were in that role from 2009 until the 31st of December 2017, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And I think you've spent your career working in a number of roles relating to housing management, particularly social housing, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Now, I'm going to ask you about emergency planning and training. Can we please have up TMO 10013898? This is the first page of the KCTMO's emergency plan, which I think you and I looked at together in phase 1 back in 2018, didn't we?
We did.
And if we look at page 3 of this document, you can see the revision dates there. The last was revised in 2016, February 2016. Is it right that this was managed by the health and safety team?
Yes.
Were you familiar with this document at the time of the fire?
Yes.
Now, if we go to your third statement, please, that's TMO 100489070, page 2, paragraph 11, you say there, the TMO had its own emergency plan, formulated and managed by its health and safety team to respond to incidents and emergencies, but it was never intended to apply to a major incident such as the Grenfell Tower fire. What do you mean by a major incident such as the Grenfell Tower fire? Why wasn't it intended to apply to that?
Well, I suppose from our experience, most of the emergencies I've dealt with over 30 years working in housing have tended to be quite small, resolved quite quickly, haven't resulted in a tower block going up in flames and people losing their life in such numbers. So from my position is how we managed, either my experience before or how at the TMO we managed smaller fires or incidents which fell within our resources and we felt we could manage it. I think Adair was the first time we raised that could have been a difficult one in terms of actually going into the evening, and that would have caused us problems in terms of having to house so many people. So in a sense it was scale in terms of Grenfell for me, and I think for everything, is off the scale in terms of actually having to manage a disaster and it's beyond our resources.
And if we turn the page to page 3, paragraph 12, you say, TMO was, of course, a social housing management company providing services to residents on behalf of RBKC and had limited resources. It was fully recognised that TMO did not have the resources to be able to respond to a major incident such as Grenfell Tower fire, and in such circumstances the RBKC emergency plan would operate, as it did on the night of the fire from a very early stage. The RBKC emergency plan remained in place for the duration of the period under scrutiny by the inquiry. Now, against that background, let's look together at the emergency plan again, TMO 100013898, the document I put to you just a moment ago. And if we turn in it to page 13, please. If we go to page 13, you can see this is part 1, KCTMO emergency planning, and under the heading there, it says, under introduction, there is an RBKC emergency plan which can be found on the RBKC intranet. This can, if necessary, be implemented via the RBKC emergency planning officer, David Kerry, who needs to be informed via CSC Pinnacle at the earliest opportunity. A decision will be made by him whether to invoke the council emergency plan and the additional resources that are available to him. Outside of normal working hours, the RBKC borough duty officer would control these resources. So just pausing there, was it right that the decision whether to invoke the RBKC emergency plan was, so far as the TMO is concerned, one for the RBKC, based on a contact made by the TMO with RBKC?
Yes, I think so. I think David Kerry was head of emergency planning, and they had local authority liaison officers on the ground.
And under the next heading, KCTMO emergency plan, it says, this sets out the roles and responsibilities within the KCTMO in the event of a major incident, which is defined as, and then it goes on, a major incident or natural disaster resulting in either death, injury, or serious disruption to normal life, which would acutely stretch the KCTMO's resources and which may ultimately overwhelm the KCTMO's capacity to manage without assistance from the council. And if you continue after the next definition, it says this: the plan is primarily for managing local KCTMO emergencies on, within, or surrounding our properties and estates, one which can be managed within the resources available to the KCTMO. However, this plan can also be used for large-scale major events which would overwhelm KCTMO's ability to manage on its own and which would involve the RBKC council resources, the difference being the scale of the emergency and the number of people affected by it. Now, do you accept, looking at that, that although it was, as I've shown you and you've agreed, for RBKC to invoke its own emergency plan, nonetheless, the TMO's emergency plan did envisage a role for the TMO in the event of a major incident?
Yes.
Yes. And that the plan, the TMO's plan, could apply in such a situation?
I think parts of it could, yes. Parts
of it. And indeed it says that it could be used for large-scale major events which would overwhelm the KCTMO's ability to manage on its own. But do you accept that there's nothing preventing the plan being applied in response to the Grenfell Tower fire, even although, of course, it would be alongside RBKC's own involvement?
Yes, in principle. I think in the reality of the night, it was overwhelming. And again, RBKC's plan was in place by the time I got there. And I think that's been my experience in all emergencies, that by the time you get there, either the police, the fire brigade, or the local authority have actually got presence on the ground. Because the issue for us all the time is with very few staff actually live in the area, so it takes time to get resources to come forward.
Yes, but just looking at what this plan the TMO's plan contemplated, do you accept that it didn't contemplate that the TMO would, as it were, drop out in the event of a large-scale major incident which would overwhelm its resources? It would continue to play a part alongside RBKC?
Yes.
Yes. And therefore, do you accept that TMO staff involved in an emergency response ought to have been well equipped to undertake those roles if the situation required it? By roles, I mean the roles of working within the emergency alongside RBKC.
Yes.
Yes. Now, the plan, as I think you would see, confers a number of roles on TMO staff in the event of an emergency, and that would include the possibility of opening and managing a rest centre to cater for those affected, yes?
Yes.
And also to arrange roll calls of residents and identify special needs and disabilities and advising on those.
Yes.
Yes. And you were aware of those roles at the time, were you?
Yeah.
Yes. And just for reference purposes, they're set out at page 28, and I've summarised them for you. Turning to training, then, can we go to your third witness statement again, please? And this time go to page 3, paragraph 16. And you say there, I understand that some TMO staff had been involved in training exercises with RBKC in relation to operation of the plans, but I do not know the detail and I was not personally involved. I'm aware that under the managements of the health and safety team, as a specific lesson learned debrief exercise following implementation of RBKC's emergency plan in relation to the fire at Adair Tower in October 2015 was conducted, at which TMO and RBKC staff participated. Again, I'm not familiar with the detail. Now, I think it's right, isn't it? And if it's wrong, tell me. But you never yourself, personally, had ever undertaken any training in relation to emergency planning and response during your time at the TMO?
No.
No. And you hadn't attended any joint training with RBKC about how their plan would work in practice or what role the TMO would have in the event of their plan being invoked. Is that right? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Nor, I think, is this correct? You didn't yourself attend the lessons learnt debrief exercise arising out of the Adair Tower fire?
I was at the executive when it was presented. I was at the board when it's presented. And I think it was the meeting with RBKC's housing team when it was presented. I wasn't at the meeting which was arranged later on with RBKC's emergency planning team. I wasn't at that. I think having listened to Teresa, it was Teresa and Janice Ray attended that meeting.
Yes. That was the 11th of April 2016, with a document we looked at yesterday with Teresa Brown, I think, and with other witnesses. Why did you not attend that meeting?
I mean, I think it was one of the ones when we spoke to Laura, it took ages to set up, and whether I wasn't available on the day it was set up. But actually, they seemed the appropriate people to be at that meeting to share the lessons that we'd learned at Adair.
Are you saying, when you say in the last answer that I was at the executive when it was presented and at the board when it was presented, are you saying that a lessons learnt debrief was given to the executive team?
As far as
the EMT?
Yeah, as far as I can recall, Janice presented a paper to ET which was a sort of outline of lessons she thought we'd learned and anything we can contribute ourselves. And based on that, we took it to RBKC.
And again, you were at the meeting, or a board meeting, were you, in your capacity as chief executive of TMO, when the debrief lessons were presented to the board? Yes.
Yes. As far as I can recall. So.
From the lessons learned, did you learn that it was important that there were robust training processes in place within the TMO to make sure the TMO staff were adequately trained in the event of an emergency?
I suppose what I learned, that actually we managed the situation as quite well in the end, in terms of actually being able to provide support to the residents in a situation. And I suppose with the Adair, it changed from a small fire in a flat on the 3rd floor. And what changed it, because I think it was a Saturday, was when the fire brigade decided to evacuate it. And that meant actually residents couldn't get back in. So it pushed the timeline of us being able to get the checks on the building done, on the floors that were damaged or water damaged, and to make sure the other flats. So what the biggest lesson we learned, and then speaking to RBKC, is that while we could deal or maybe rehouse a small number of people, if you're going to rehouse a whole block, that was beyond our ability to do that. I think we also learned that one of the things I'd learned ages ago, that actually if you have an emergency, you need cash because people leave a building without taking things. So we did have cash, which we actually distributed that day to anybody that required it. That was one of the lessons picked up by RBKC. Also, our staff had credit cards so you could actually book hotels. One of the things is, even if you're a local authority, hotels still want you to pay by credit card to secure the bookings. So there were lessons in terms of actually how that incident evolved and how it changed, and it felt manageable within the resources we had in terms of the staff on the ground and how we supported people. But I think, like everything, I do think there should have been more training. That's on reflection.
Why wasn't there?
I can't recall whether I can't recall at the moment, sorry.
Let's look at paragraph 15, the previous paragraph of this statement on page 3. You say, in circumstances where RBKC's plan was in operation, TMO had no formal role except to provide resource and support to RBKC when requested by them to do so. That is how it was planned and operated.
That was my interpretation.
That was your interpretation. It's not in fact quite right, is it? Because according to the parts of the TMO's emergency plan that you and I have just looked at, the TMO does have a role, even in a major emergency, to sit alongside RBKC.
I accept that point.
Yes. Was there ever, in the light of that, any kind of pre-agreement, any work done between RBKC and TMO about the role TMO would actually, in practice, occupy in the event of a major emergency?
I don't think so, apart from the meeting my team had with emergency planning.
Right. Did you ever yourself seek formally to clarify the role of the TMO and identify clear duties and responsibilities in the event of a major emergency?
No, I didn't do that.
Why is that?
I felt that, having raised it with Laura Johnson, the team, that was part of how they would bring it forward to us and tell us how we fit into it.
Let's look at TMO 00840414. This is a TMO executive team meeting on the 11th of November 2015, at which you were present together with Yvonne Birch and Barbara Matthews and also Sasha Jevons, as you can see. If you go, please, to item 3 at the top of page 2, the minutes record as follows. Adair Tower responses. Barbara noted that she is coordinating all responses to ensure consistency. The following requests have been made. And then if you look at the next main paragraph down below the bullet points, it says, RBKC's emergency planning officer, David Kerry, did dispatch a liaison officer, and when Robert had spoken to Laura Johnson, she put forward Amanda Gill to help. Overall, it was felt that RBKC was supportive, but going forward, it would be good for the TMO to be more involved with RBKC on their emergency planning strategy, so that contact numbers and roles and responsibilities are known by all. And then it goes on, the TMO's emergency plan was discussed, and it was agreed that it would be good for ET to have a session with Janice Ray and Hash Shamtune to get a greater understanding of who owns and updates it and lessons learned from the fire at Adair Tower, Jill to arrange. And what action, if any, was taken as a result of that decision or that discussion to make sure roles and responsibilities are known to all, or known by all, as it says in the last line of the first paragraph I've just read to you?
In terms, I'm not sure if the ET meeting that followed this was where we had the discussion around the lessons learned from Adair. Is that the right? Sorry, is that the right timeline? I'm afraid.
Well, I was asking you. I mean,
I'm just trying to remember it some time ago. So, in a sense, we did have a meeting to talk about lessons learned, which we then took to RBKC. And I would have seen that meeting that Teresa went to and Janice went to would have picked up these issues here.
Yeah, I mean, my question is, was there any training, specific training, on the TMO's emergency plan for the executive team, at the very least, so that the executive team knew what the precise roles and responsibilities were, as between RBKC on the one hand and the TMO on the other?
I can't recall, I'm afraid. It's down for my PA to arrange, and I can't recall if that happened.
Right. I think it's right, isn't it, that there was no training rolled out to TMO staff about how their own roles and responsibilities were clearly to be followed.
So we didn't, as far as I recall, we didn't do training for all staff. We did training with our on-call staff and our out-of-hours contractors to be clear about their roles when they were on duty.
And is it correct that, despite this discussion at the TMO executive meeting on the 11th of November 2015, at the time of the Grenfell Tower fire, the TMO still lacked a formal role, a clearly and formally defined role, in the event that RBKC's contingency planning systems were invoked?
I would probably have to agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's then turn to the role of the TMO and interaction a little bit more closely. If we go to your third statement again, please, page 5 this time, paragraph 23. It says, TMO's role in the aftermath was therefore very much to provide support to RBKC when requested by RBKC to do so, and all issues raised by residents and others were required to be directed to RBKC, who performed the emergency management role. Were any specific requests for assistance made by RBKC to the TMO, to your knowledge, in the immediate aftermath of the fire?
I mean, the key one was requests for information from our system in terms of the tenancies and leaseholders to start developing the understanding who was there on the night and afterwards. There was certainly issues around the whole mechanical engineering. So because in Grenfell Tower, all the mechanical engineering for the walkways was held, with fire sort of disabled that. So there was, throughout the day and the days after, requests for, in terms of actually how do you replace the boiler and the heating and things like that.
So core housing matters.
Core housing matters.
Can we go, please, to your fourth statement, page 1, paragraph 4. You say there, in the second line, that the TMO assisted RBKC, who were managing the rest centres. Teresa and her team attended at the rest centres on the night of the fire, assisting the residents in any way that they could, and I believe that the assistance provided in the weeks following the fire was simply a continuation of this. To my knowledge, RBKC did not request this assistance, but understandably welcomed the TMO's support, as the TMO had more resources in terms of the number of people who knew both the business and the residents. So was the assistance offered by the TMO staff on a voluntary basis?
I recognise from the statement before that where I said they did. I mean, partly I was trying to remember on the night when you had conversations all the time, and whether they asked or not. I felt that the issue we had is we had the house and management staff, and actually if we can use them to help add value to the RBKC's plan, that was the right thing to do.
Yes.
But actually, partly confusing. I had lots of conversations with Laura, and she might have said, can you help us with this way? But it was a dynamic situation that we were sort of rushing about doing things. So,
But in the dynamic situation where you're rushing about doing things, were you rushing about doing things on essentially a voluntary basis, or were you following a set of directions clearly bounded, given to you by RBKC?
I think it was probably a mixture of two. It was voluntary on the night to bring in resources to support, and as the days unfolded, it's how we fitted into their responses in terms of actually providing support where they required.
Right.
So I think it's a mixture.
So would it be fair to say, I suppose, that you co-worked on a reactive basis responding to the situation as best you could as it evolved.
I think that's well put.
Let's then look at your own involvement. You attended the site in the early hours of the fire, and I think, is it right, that was the only occasion in that first week following the fire that you attended the site, the tower? And given that your staff were actively involved on the ground, why didn't you attend the scene more frequently to offer leadership, encouragement, oversight, support?
So I suppose what I did offer staff support. We had our staff structure. There were other issues about me being on site, which was seen as not very sensible due to, after the fire, a number of issues happening which raised concerns about safety, appropriate. Is it going to be sensible to have me there if people don't want you, because actually it's taking the focus away from the rescue you're trying to do? So I, in a sense, set myself up as that we, managing my company, the TMO, and all the issues that were affecting it, not just with the disaster that was happening in one part of the company, but that we also had 9,000 other homes across the borough we were still responsible for and still seeking to provide service and manage all the issues that had been raised after the fire. So although I wasn't there, I was in touch with staff who were on the ground. I met them at our different offices, and I was, in a sense, doing other strategic issues that were coming at me full force every day that I was there.
Now, you say in that last answer that you were managing the TMO and all the issues that were affecting it. Where were you doing that from?
From 346 and the hub.
Right.
So we had 2 offices in the middle of the borough and 1 in the north.
Right. Let's, in light of that, let's just help me with something. If you go to your 4th statement, please, at page 3, turn the page, paragraph 12. You say there, I personally had little role in managing the TMO staff members leading the response on the ground, as it was more appropriate that this be led by Sasha and Teresa, who had the housing experience, knowledge and background. During this period, I was based at the TMO office dealing with matters arising from the fire, reporting on issues to the TMO board, executive team and other interested parties, and actioning issues arising from RBKC Gold Group. Therefore, whilst not present on the ground to provide physical support to staff members, I provided higher level support in coordinating the resources and support required by both of them and other relevant parties. So you say higher level support. What do you mean by that, first?
So the context, I have a housing management team. I had leaders of that team. I had a director of housing and an exec director of housing, whose key role in their roles were to manage the housing and all that entails. I, as chief exec, had other roles to play. So in terms, I had a board who were seeking information from me. So we have a board of 15. 8 residents who were board members were finding it incredibly challenging themselves. The board had duties it was responsible for, that it wanted answers for. In terms, that comes with the role of chief exec. If that's what I meant by high level, it's ensuring my company or the company had enough, was seeking enough resources and was able to deliver on what we were trying to deliver and deal with all the issues coming through the change in working practices, HR, governance, legal.
And what practical support did you offer Teresa Brown and her team to deliver in their roles at rest centres?
So with Teresa, I spoke to her all the time by telephone if she needed. I mean, as you saw her yesterday, she's a competent person who had her team on the ground and was working. I spoke to Teresa, and we had other people who were providing support to her. And I mean, I'm afraid I can't come up with a range of things, but I was pleased to say here that she said yesterday that she felt supported, and that's what I'm pleased she said.
In practical terms, did you have a regular set of updates from her?
Yeah, I mean, so really from the beginning of it, we had almost like a day-to-day running meetings with whoever was available, be it the exec, the senior management team, board, to try to make sure that we're trying to keep as many people informed as possible. So we also attended some other meetings in the office to talk to staff about what was going on in the bigger picture. So those meetings were used to share, support, and to try to sort of get ahead of the game, which was difficult because it was a fast-moving environment that seemed to grow as each day went on in terms of the humanitarian crisis that the fire.
Do you remember whether she reported any problems to you and which needed either RBKC resources or London Gold?
Well, I think sometimes when I went to London Gold meetings for a number of times. I think it was the first 5, and then there was a break, and then some more. So we used those meetings to actually raise any issues that they saw that I could raise at London Gold or vice versa.
But during the first 24 hours, 48 hours after the fire, did she ask for more resources? Did she tell you she wasn't coping in such a way that led you to think that you needed RBKC's resources or London Gold's resources?
So I think she never told me she wasn't coping. I think that's one thing, and I obviously did ask. Well, I did ask her. Second, in terms of resources, what we did was, in a sense, the disaster stopped us in terms of our normal services to 10,000, and what we sought to do, because it resulted in a change in working practice from general 9 to 5 to trying to provide a 24-hour cover, which meant you had to actually ask staff to work different routes, ask people to volunteer to help. And what I was then trying to do was free up staff who would usually be doing their normal job out in the south that could come to the north and help with the work, and then we would try to seek to backfill those positions with other people so that actually we could have more of our own staff helping out with the situation.
I want to ask you next about a meeting on the morning of the 14th of June with Mr. Kerry and Mr. Holgate, David Kerry and Nicholas Holgate. Can we go, please, to RBK 13296? I'll show you the first page of that to show you what it is. This is David Kerry's typed emergency event log sheet, as you can see.
Did you make it a bit bigger? Sorry.
Can we expand that, please? Thank you. And you can see from the top right-hand corner that it's dated the 14th of June 2017. Can we go, please, to page 10 in it? And if you look at the left-hand side on page 10, you can see 10 o'clock, meeting with David Kerry, Chief Executive Nicholas Holgate, Director of Housing Laura Johnson, CEO KCTMO Robert Black, Council Silver Stuart Priestley. Do you remember how you became involved in that meeting? Did someone ring you and ask you to attend? Or was that...
I would think that would have been it.
Right. If you look at the column on the right, it says this, in the second bullet point, advice given by David Kerry to Nicholas Holgate, that should say Holgate, and then the first bullet point, this incident is bigger than any one local authority in London can manage. Consideration should be given to asking for mutual aid for the Beck. There are people who can support NH, that's Nicholas Holgate, and RBKC Gold Group, including, and then there's a list of names, John Barradell, Eleanor Kelly, Andrew Meek, Alistair Ayres. Do you recall David Kerry advising Nicholas Holgate that the Grenfell Tower fire was an incident bigger than any one local authority in London could manage?
Well, I must have done. I can't recall this meeting, but I'll go with the minutes.
You don't, right. So you don't have any reason to think that the minutes aren't an accurate reflection of what transpired, right? Do you remember how Nicholas Holgate responded to David Kerry's advice as written here?
No, I can't advise.
You can't. Did you share David Kerry's view that the incident, as you saw it by this point, was bigger than any one local authority could manage?
I mean, I can't remember what I said, but I was feeling that it's a big incident, and it was a bit overwhelming. So that would be my opinion.
Overwhelming for the TMO?
I think I'd start with me individually.
Oh, I see.
And then but just trying to explain what it's like when you're there all this day, trying to actually sort of manage that. So I think I wasn't quite clear at that time, but I think as the days went on, it felt like it had got bigger than the RBKC could deal with.
Was it your view that it was overwhelming potentially for RBKC?
I'm not sure if I felt that at that meeting. Right. I think in later days I felt that it was good that other people were coming in to provide support. I
want to ask you next about RBKC Gold Group meetings. Yeah. the inquiry has seen records which indicate that you attended every RBKC Gold meeting between the 14th of June and the 20th of June. And just to count them out for you, we have you at 2 on the 14th, 2 on the 15th, 2 on the 16th, 1 on the 19th, and on the 20th. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. Now, if we go to your fourth statement, please, again, page 4, paragraph 15, you say that your recollection is, I was invited to the Gold Group meetings by Nicholas Holgate's PA, Asha Gupta. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. Why do you think that you were invited to the RBKC Gold Group meetings? My question is, what did you think your role was in those meetings?
I think my role was to be so I wasn't part of Gold Group, so there was a sort of side where you sat as attendee. I think my role was to provide any information or that they requested at that time from the TMO, and as we'd been involved.
Right.
And it wasn't, in a sense, it was a role just to be there and see what you could provide.
And if you look at your next paragraph, paragraph 16, you say, I understood the role of the TMO to be to respond to the requirements of the group, mostly in the form of offering resources, knowledge and experience of the stock and residents. Now, do you accept, based on what you say there, that there was a role for the TMO in that you brought specific insight about the tower, the local area, and the residents in it that others might not have had?
Yes.
Yeah. And what resources, you refer to resources, did you offer the Gold Group, RBKC Gold Group, at these meetings?
Well, the resources were the staff on the ground who were providing support, but also if there was specialist knowledge around asset management, which was a big issue for us in terms of actually the mechanical engineering being affected across a large part of the estate.
So the resources was, well, what, staff on the ground with knowledge of the local community?
Yes.
And knowledge of the individual characteristics, needs, vulnerabilities?
Yeah, and organise it, because we, in sense, managed the housing. So, in sense, our staff had local knowledge, which, again, RBKC staff would have, but there weren't so many of them in their housing group.
Then let's turn to the first of the meetings, which took place at 11 a.m. on the 14th of June. At that meeting, did RBKC appear to be in control of the situation?
They did, yes.
They did. And let's go to the action sheet, please, from that meeting. RBK 30s 23233. RBK 30s 23233. Page 1. You could see who was present. Also in attendance, you are named, as well as Yvonne Birch there. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Now, if we look at item 1 to the very foot of the page, you can see, if we scroll down, there's an update from Rebecca Blackburn, a number of updates set out in respective activities at rest centres. And you can see there, two rest centres set up, Rugby Portobello Trust and Clement James Centre. The Red Cross are at RPT. Managers were in place. I'll turn the page. Managers were in place at all the centres. Further rest centre being set up at Westway Sports Centre. British Red Cross are on standby to go in. No idea on the number of people in the rest centres, but they're very busy. No council officers present at the rest centres for a long time. They are now there, aware that a number of supporting rest centres which have been set up by the community have an officer on foot going round to pass on information. You see that?
Yes.
So just pausing there, there's no record of the presence or involvement of TMO staff at the rest centres. My question showing you this is this. Were you in active communication with your staff on the ground and told about the activities being undertaken at these rest centres?
I would say yes.
You would say yes, but do you recall it?
I know that my staff were on the ground support and were working with the rest centres, and that was the key thing. It was a bit sketchy because actually this is quite soon after it. And so it was almost like a first meeting where you're finding out what's going on across the borough. Do you remember whether you fed in any updates that you'd received from your TMO staff on the ground to this meeting? Not at that time or under that heading. And if we look at section 2, on page 3 of this action sheet, it says, actions and steers from NH.
And then in the first bullet point, in the last sentence, it says, Robert Black said that £10,000 had been given to the housing team to help people buy essentials. Was that the TMO's housing team, or was that RBKC's?
The TMO's.
Right. And who at the TMO had authorised that funding? Was that you?
I would have probably made my finance director.
Right. And was that done in consultation with RBKC or by the TMO of its own volition?
The TMO of its own volition.
And why did the TMO provide funds to RBKC? Is that where it was being directed?
I think it was directed more locally so that staff on the ground, if met residents who needed help, could be given help.
Right. And how was the £10,000 given?
It was given in cash in small amounts at different times of the day, depending on what people were required.
Right, but this is 11 o'clock in the morning, so by 11 o'clock, £10,000 in cash had been extracted from the vaults of the TMO. Is that how did it work?
Vaults, and we'd had a special arrangement with our bank, again based on other experiences in the day, that if we were required to get large scales of money out, they could do that with our bank. So in a sense, what we recognise is that because of the size of it, people, as I said at Adair, people leave the tower, have nothing, have requirements, and one of the best things you can do is if you can help them by giving them some money to be able to achieve things they need at that moment. So it seemed very much as if us just trying to do a humanitarian position before, because I think it was still forming then, so it's just something we could do that would add value or help.
Yes, I mean, why was it the TMO having to find this money rather than RBKC?
Well, I'm sure RBKC, I think later on did money. I think partly, as I said before, there were certain aspects we could maybe do quicker than they did, and that's the sort of position if we could help.
On this topic, did the TMO have a budget, a line item in its budget, to fund activities under its own emergency plan?
I don't think so. I think we just have our budget with headings. There wasn't I can't recall, to tell you the truth, if there was a specific, but I doubt it.
Right. I mean, was there a maximum amount budgeted for emergencies covered by the plan, after which you would have to go to RBKC?
No.
Right. The second RBKC Gold Group meeting took place at 3 o'clock, 1500 hours on the same day, 14th June. If we go, please, to RBK 30s 23239, let's look at that. This is the action sheet for that meeting. Again, you're recorded as being in attendance. Bottom of page 1, please, third bullet point down, broader cordon. Advice is to go to the rest centres and identify themselves to staff there. Go and stay with friends and family in the first instance, but will house the old and vulnerable. Were you concerned about this approach to evacuated residents?
I think it was advice that the council... I think the advice from the council was to use the rest centres they had. But like a lot of times in RBKC, people have lots of family and friends nearby, and they go there rather than a rest centre. It's a quite tight-knit community, and people have lots of people they know, and probably that felt if you could do that, that was better than being at a rest centre.
Right. And whose suggestion was that? I mean, it says update from housing. Was that Laura Johnson?
It'd be from Laura Johnson.
Right. And did you discuss this with Laura Johnson before this meeting, or is this something she came out with?
I just attended a meeting and she came out with it.
Right, I see. Do you know, or can you remember, how that advice was to be communicated to evacuated residents?
No, I take it with this. One of the things that would go back to RBKC's comms team, and they then work out how to tell people.
Was there any discussion about what the criteria were to be for who constituted vulnerable?
Not at that meeting, I can't recall.
Right. Was there any discussion about obtaining accurate information on who was vulnerable?
Not at that meeting, as far as I can recall.
Now let's go, pausing there for the moment, to a meeting on the same day, 14th of June at 6:30 p.m. of the TMO's board. This is at TMO 10017445. There's the first page, page 1, 6:30 p.m. And you can see who was in attendance. including you and Yvonne Birch, also Sasha Jevons and Barbara Matthews, Peter Madison, Janice Ray. There's a minute's silence at the bottom of page 1. And then if you go please to page 4, let's pick it up at paragraph 7.4 on page 4. Top of the screen, it says, the emergency support and temporary housing provision for affected residents was discussed. It was noted that the council wished to take the lead here. The council had told SJ, that's Sasha Jevons, that hotel accommodation would be provided for all affected residents. You'd been in attendance at the 3 o'clock meeting of RBKC's Gold Group, as we've just seen, where, as we've just seen, the decision was to advise evacuees to go to rest centres or stay with friends and family, and that only the old and the vulnerable would be housed. Was there any clarification of the position in that respect given to the board at this meeting?
I can't tell from just what's reported here, I apologise.
Well, no, that's the point. Why didn't you clarify? Well, do you accept that looking at this minute, there's no clarification given to the board that only the old and the vulnerable would be housed, as opposed to all affected residents?
I can't recall. I mean, another thing I can remember, what I might suggest is that things had changed since then. There might have been a further update.
Right.
It was a very changeable situation about what you might have at one meeting and what was then coming across. Because I think what was happening is that, you know, the number of people, you know, in terms of the walkways was, and people not wanting to go back to the homes is growing. So I think it was an evolving time. And things could change quite quickly.
But do you recall that there was a change between 3 p.m. and 6:30 p.m., whereby at the meeting at 3 p.m. it was only the old and vulnerable who were to be rehoused and everybody else to go to the rest centres or stay with friends and family, but by 6:30 hotel accommodation to be provided for all affected residents. Do you remember what
I can't recall that, sorry.
Right. One of the things which we heard yesterday from Teresa Brown which changed was that the walkways were to be evacuated. Was that something that affected the approach between 3 o'clock and 6:30 on the 14th?
I think so, because I mean, I think I'm trying to remember the numbers. I think the walkways were 840. There's a vague memory number there, and that's a huge amount of people. And I think the reality is trying to get them all to stay with family and friends. And I think RBK, I think, if I can remember, that, you know, their position changed in terms of actually they would seek accommodation for as many people as they could. And I think the whole issue is that in terms it started off with Grenfell, and then it was the walkways, and then there was houses round about as people sort of told people they weren't feeling safe there.
Right. I mean, one possibility is that the minute is not a faithful record of the discussion. Another is that things have changed. Another is that there was confusion, and that what you were telling what the TMO board was being told was different from what was being proposed. Can you help us? Which was it?
I think there was lots of confusion. In terms of the minute, it's not a verbatim record of the meeting in terms of that. But I think it also was a change in situation.
Now, you were asked about this in Rule 9 and in your fourth statement. Let's look at that. Page 10, paragraph 37. This is what you say.
Sorry, can I just, before you...
Yeah.
I just noted I wasn't at the board meeting at that time, because in terms it says I just joined at point 8, because I was probably in other meetings. So in terms of that narrative, that discussion at the time of the board, I wasn't there for.
Right. That assumes that this note is linear in the sense that it's taken chronologically. But your recollection is that you joined part way through.
Well, I follow the minutes because they're usually taken, you know, in that order.
Right. I see. Let's go to paragraph 37 of your fourth statement, page 10. you say, my understanding was that the offer of hotel accommodation would extend to all affected residents, including those evacuated from neighbouring properties. So it looks as if your understanding was entirely consistent with the note of the meeting, even though you weren't there at that part of the meeting, yes?
Yes.
Can you therefore explain why you had, as it appears, a different understanding to that which had been discussed and agreed at the RBKC Gold meeting at 3 p.m? Was it, again, because there was confusion, or was it because things had changed?
I think it's, as I say, it may have been confusion, but I think it also changed because I think it was a changeable situation that night when the numbers of people affected by the fire was happening by the hour.
Right. Let's then go back to the Gold Group meeting at RBK 23239, page 2. If you look, please, at the top of page 2, third bullet point down, it says 30 households have been identified in the Clement James Centre, no numbers from other rest centres. And then immediately underneath that, there's an update from Robert Black. Have staff at every rest centre, need to think about presence at night and have a discussion on resources. Now, you say you had staff, or it says that you told the meeting that there was staff at every rest centre. Were you not in a position then to feed in information about the numbers of people in the rest centres that your staff were seeing?
No, but, well, I would take it that I had a meeting previously begun to this, and this was the update that I'd been told at that time.
Right, but why weren't you in a position to feed in information about the numbers coming to the rest centres that your TMO staff were seeing?
That information was coming from my staff to RBKC so that they were on the BEC, and that so they could understand. That's why, in terms of it came from the other people above.
So, but not coming to you?
No, not directly, because they were working on that basis, trying to support RBKC at that time.
But did you not need to know how many people and where they were from were turning up at the rest centres asking for assistance in order properly to brief the Gold meetings?
That was the briefing on those issues were given by Laura Johnson and Housing, because they had overall view of that. I didn't have the overall view.
But why didn't you have an overall view? It was your own staff at the...
Yeah, my staff were out on site at these times, and in a sense, they were doing those jobs. So in terms of when I came here, again, I must have met Teresa, and she told me that, and that's all feeding back. So it was just a general thing that I'd been told, trying to update people what we're doing. I didn't have a lot of detail behind it.
Right, but did she not keep you constantly updated? I thought you told us that she did.
Yeah, but we didn't always. I didn't have all the detail because she was dealing with that. It was sort of a broader terms of what she was doing and how she was working.
Did you not want to have an overall grasp of the numbers and the growth in the numbers that were arriving at places like the Westway, so that you could make provision, understand whether you needed more staff at the rest centres, understand what communications needed to be put in place so that the community would understand better where to go?
So I would assume that is coming to RBKC and then being shared at the Gold, which I sit on, because they had an overall picture, not just of what was going on in the borough, which I didn't.
But why were you not in the loop, that loop?
I'm not, it's very hard to recall. I might have been in the loop. There might have been other things I was doing and trying to manage, and I trusted in terms of actually what was being given was actually being collected and shared with RBKC. It's quite hard for me to remember the specifics. I apologise.
Do you remember a specific discussion about resources taking place at that meeting?
There was. I'm not sure there. What in terms of that note, that for me, the issue was actually understanding how to provide cover of these different shifts. Yeah. And that was a discussion of resources which we probably had back at my company.
Yes. I mean, if we go back to your fourth statement, page 6, look at paragraph 24. you, just above it, you cite from this meeting note, and there's some questions that you're asked about it, and you say in 24, this concerns staffing resource. The issue which the TMO encountered was that in normal circumstances, TMO staff were contracted to work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, Monday to Friday. Turn the page. Monday to Friday. However, rest centres were to remain open 24/7. Therefore, my concern was ensuring that we had sufficient resource to provide cover whilst allowing staff to recover and rest. My recollection is that having discussed this internally, it was decided that we would ask staff to work different shifts to ensure that the required cover could be provided, which staff agreed to do. This meant we were able to meet our objective to man the rest centres. Was there a discussion at this meeting about TMO staffing levels so that the rest centres could be...
So there's discussion about staffing levels from the TMO so we could provide the support, and that's where I mentioned earlier that what we were trying to do was free up staff in other parts of the organisation to be able to work in those areas while still seeking to provide a service to the other 9,000 people, the different roles we were playing there.
Now, given that you've said that the TMO had no formal role and that RBKC didn't request the assistance that was provided, at least in part, voluntarily, and of course the fact that the TMO was not a responder for the purposes of the Civil Contingencies Act, was it your view at the time that RBKC was leaning too heavily on the TMO to man the rest centres? I
think that's hard to comment. In reflection, it might be. When you step back and look, I think at the time we wanted to help. We wanted to provide resources with people who we thought could help. And maybe in reflection, I should have been clearer that we needed more resources beyond that. But that's a reflection. At the time, we were just trying to do all we could to help.
Did the TMO have sufficient staff resourced and trained to provide the support that RBKC expected or wanted at the rest centres?
I think so. I mean, we had a lot of staff in our housing team whose job is to work with our residents. We also had leasehold team who work with leaseholders. Their job is to manage tenancies, understand the issues in housing. So in terms of what you're asking them to do is actually be at the rest centres and actually seek to provide support as directed, on a difficult night.
So does it follow from that you didn't raise any concerns with RBKC at these gold meetings about your own staffing levels because you thought it was adequate?
No, I sort of mentioned it a couple of times, and what we did then was take other action to address it. It's quite difficult to raise issues about how difficult things are when everybody's in a difficult position and you're sitting around a meeting where people are dealing with incredibly challenging issues, to sit there and say, I don't have enough resources. I think we really sought to provide those resources, but one way or another. And again, I think in reflection, that might have been a better thing to do, but it didn't, not on the night.
Did you ask RBKC for more resources?
I don't think formally.
Informally?
I don't. It depends. I'm trying to sometimes remember the 5 days and the days after. I don't think I did, no.
And why was that?
Because I think we took action ourselves. So one of the issues is as you freed staff up, we were, like RBKC, inundated with offers of help from other organisations, housing organisations. And one of the things, of course, if you recruit people, it takes ages to do. But lots of housing organisations were offering help. And we were struggling to manage that with all the other stuff. So I think you mentioned an email from Radoika from Campbell to Cal yesterday. So we worked historically with a number of consultants for different reasons. And Campbell to Cal have a very good link with the market. And what they offered was to actually liaise with the housing associations to see what they could offer, and for us to give them lists of people or anything required, and then they would do that. So in a sense, if we were short of asset managers, we told that to the team, and then they spoke to their contacts about if anybody had an asset manager they could release, or a housing officer. So in a sense, it was an offer from the sector of help and support, which allowed us. And also, again, I think you read something out from a woman from Bromley saying they didn't want the TMO bringing in anybody. Well, it was what it was to do. The people who come in were professional housing professionals in their areas, coming from well-established organisations, and that activity helped us free up our resources so that they could help with the operation at Grenfell. It was a way of actually doing it. And again, reflection, I suppose, as the Gold Group trains, I knew those people less and less, and they didn't really contact me. So in terms, you find yourself looking at what I needed to do to be able to, again, the two aspects of my job time, support the operation at Grenfell, but also try to ensure I was managing services to 9,000 other people who were, at that time, quite demanding for us to speak to them.
Let's then turn to the next Gold Group meeting on the 15th of June, 10 a.m. Action sheet at RBK30 is 23234. You're in attendance, as you can see, and update from BK is the first item there. Update from BK on Westway Sports Centres. That has a number of points in it. 20 to 25 people stayed overnight. People want to know when they can go home. And then surprised by a limited number of people coming through the doors, the fourth bullet point down. Were you aware by the time of this meeting, 10 a.m. on the 15th of June, that potentially 845 residents from nearby properties were also affected?
Probably by this meeting I would know that there was lots of discussion around the walkways about what you could do. And was there a danger that, people weren't going to move back?
Did those present at the meeting from RBKC appear, to your way of looking at it, to appreciate the scale of those affected from the walkways?
I think they were understanding of what a job it would give them, along with all the other things, activities they were having to manage at these Gold meetings.
Given that only 20 to 25 people had used the Westway Centre overnight on that first night, were you and others at the meeting concerned that these numbers were very low, and asked the question, well, where are the rest?
Well, I think some people did ask that, as far as I recall, and again, I think it went back to people saying that they were either staying with friends or family or whatever. I mean, but it was quite hard to get an understanding of the numbers and where people were. So.
Was there any discussion, given these low numbers, was there any discussion at the meeting that people hadn't got the message to go to the Westway Centre?
I can't recall from that part.
Was there any discussion about having missing residents? They'd gone off and couldn't be tracked down.
I can't recall from that meeting. Going
back to the meeting, notes, please, if we can, at page 6. No, the board meeting. So sorry. We go to back to the board meeting, TMO 10017445, at page 6. If we go, please, to point 10.1.5, this is at a time when you say you were at the meeting. That says there, officers should meet the council at 1 p.m. tomorrow to discuss the coordination of efforts. Did that meeting take place? This is...
I imagine it did.
Did you attend?
I can't recall. Do
you remember any discussion about the coordination of efforts between TMO and RBKC?
I would need to understand if there's a minute at the meeting so I can see what it was about.
Well, that's fair enough. I don't think we've got one. But right. If we do, I'll show it to you. Let's go then to the second RBKC Gold Group meeting of the 15th of June at 3:30, 15:30. RBK 30 is 23236. Page 1, you can see that you were in attendance at this meeting, and if you go lower down the screen, response priorities is the heading, and underneath that, people, you see that. And there are the following updates recorded, among other things. And if you go about halfway down the list of bullet points, just below halfway down, it says TMO managing list and have made contact with 81 households from Grenfell Tower. We do not know where some of the residents went to stay. Now, I asked you that question in relation to the 10 o'clock meeting, but is it correct that by 15:30 on that day, 15th of June, this question was now being expressly asked?
Yes.
Yes. And who had reported, well, who was it who said at this meeting what is recorded at that bullet point?
It either been myself or Yvonne. I don't know if Yvonne was in attendance at that meeting.
Well, she was recorded as being in attendance,
yeah.
Yes, if you look.
So it might have been one of the two of us in terms of actually what we were told, or probably pre-meeting before we went to this.
And who had reported that to you? Who had raised the problem that you didn't know where some of the residents...
I think it would have been Teresa if she was at the meeting.
Right. Do you recall any concerns raised at this meeting by RBKC that a number of residents were unaccounted for?
I can't recall. I mean, I'm sure there was a discussion around about it, but it's not recorded here.
Mm. Now, Teresa Brown, in her third witness statement, and she helped with this when she gave evidence yesterday, said that she'd remembered sitting with a colleague at about 9 p.m. on the evening of the 14th of June, ringing round residents and finding that she'd been unable to get hold of people on a repeated basis, and a number of phones dropped to voicemail. Did you know that she'd had a ring round that evening and had not succeeded in getting hold of everybody?
I think I was probably told that she'd been ringing around residents, and they've got a mixed response in terms of actually who they've been able to contact and who hadn't.
Right. Did you raise with RBKC at this meeting the concerns that you had about not being able to contact residents and identify their whereabouts?
I can't recall that, sorry.
If we go back to the action sheet at page 1 there, third bullet point down, it says, we'll run the rest centre tonight, but further decision will depend upon the cordon. You see that?
Yeah.
Was consideration given to closing the Westway Sports Centre as a rest centre if residents were able to go home?
I think, I can't recall for that, that would have come from RBKC.
Right, I see. And the next one says, if the cordon is not lifted, then have over 800 people to find places, we'll need to seek help from government. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
You do? And was that something of a shock or surprise to you?
I think it was it's another overwhelming things when you sit in these meetings and you're trying to work out how to deal with the people who are obviously gone at the Grenfell, and then you have the walkways. And I think that was the nature of this disaster, because in the sense it challenged all the other housing round about it. With the walkways, a lot of it is because of the mechanical engineering, which actually made it difficult. And I think it was, I think it was a challenging thing to face.
If we go to page 3, under cordon reduction, you can see the heading there. It says, removal of cordon was the critical factor in the decision to keep WSC open. Latest report is the Three Finger Walks will be reoccupied tonight, but not Grenfell Walk. The Academy to stay in cordon, but not the leisure centre. Trellis fencing to go up, making the cordon area hard. Lalo working with the police for phased reoccupation of the area. There's no reference here to Treadgold House, which was also evacuated. Why was that?
I'm not sure here. I mean, Treadgold, as far as I remember, Treadgold was evacuated because of the fear at one stage that the building might fall, and I think that was somewhere in the night that was evacuated. I I don't think that it was damaged as a whole, but I have no memory of that, so I don't know why it's not mentioned, or maybe...
And what provision was discussed for those needing accommodation from Grenfell Walk, which was going to remain evacuated?
I can't recall from this meeting note.
Teresa Brown reported a number of concerns about the condition of the walkway properties, which she told us about yesterday. No hot water, no gas for cooking, problems with damaged doors because of forced entry, and problems with the door entry system. And she says she raised that with Stuart Priestley. That's in her statement, third statement. Did you know about those concerns?
Yes.
You did. Did you feed those concerns into the RBKC Gold Group?
I think I did. I think you showed Teresa an email that I did to Nicholas Holgate yesterday.
Yes, but at the meetings, at the Gold meetings?
I can't remember.
Right.
I mean, there was a lot of discussion between all the different groups about the walkways, and we were aware that in terms of if you're going to reopen them, you have to actually make sure we've checked them out, cleaned them up, that people were happy to move back in. As Teresa said yesterday, some people seem to have got through the cordon and were already there. I think there's a great will for people to go back. People wanted to go back, but we wanted to make sure, again, that they were fit to live in.
Was there a discussion about the alternatives, given the numbers, that people were coming back into houses where there were, or homes where there was no hot water, no cooking facilities, security problems on the one hand, or rehousing them on an emergency basis on the other?
I didn't hear that conversation. There was bits and pieces, but it almost, again, when you were sitting at these meetings, that Beck and the Gold Group wanted these open and people to be rehoused.
Really what I'm driving at is, did the TMO find itself having to permit people back into their own homes despite the condition that they were in, because RBKC wouldn't or couldn't rehouse them on an emergency basis because of the numbers? So
I think yes, but we put in place a range of services to address the concerns, be that the cleaning of the block, so substantial cleaning to make it clean, assessment of each flat in terms of gas, electricity, and that, doors that had to be fixed if they'd been broken in. So we had a repairs company and other contractors on standby to do that. It's a big job, and we work closely with people to try to make a success. But it did mean, as you said, that there was no hot water, because that required a boiler to be put in place to reconnect that. We had electricity, so people could have, as mentioned yesterday, could have the sort of cooking pans that they could do there, and the westway for cleaning up if required.
Was any consideration given, to your knowledge, was there any discussion about giving the residents of the walkways a choice about whether to go back to their own homes which had no hot water or cooking facilities on the one hand, or to go to an emergency accommodation, a hotel perhaps, on the other?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think the pressure was to get people to move back, because that was a huge number of people, that if we could get people back into those homes, that would take the pressure off other aspects. It did then create problems for us to make sure those homes were habitable and safe.
Well, indeed, and that's why I asked the question, was there any thought given to sharing the pain between you and RBKC by essentially giving the residents of the walkway a choice, an individual choice, either to move back in to a home which had no hot water and no cooking facilities, or to be found a emergency accommodation in the short term?
I wasn't involved in a conversation like that.
By the end of the second Gold Group meeting on the 15th of June, at 3:30, as we've seen, what were your observations on RBKC's capacity to cope with the emergency relief response?
I felt they were reaching their capacity, because certainly if you look at having another 850 people who might have to rehouse, I think also there was other things happening. So we're looking at housing, but there was other things happening outside that, you know, the generosity of people donating stuff created a considerable problem for the council until they got someone else to manage it. I mean, they were being overwhelmed with gifts or clothes or boxes, and that became an issue, because it's actually, how do you treat it with respect? How do you use it? How do you manage it? And I think that's one of the things you learn in terms of maybe they should have got Marks and Spencers or someone else to manage it quicker, because I think it was affecting. It was also just people were very wary that they didn't want to disrespect things if people had gifted it. So I think they were getting near capacity in terms of what they were doing, certainly in communications.
Right. And to your knowledge, was any contact being made with central government to provide assistance in relation to the problems with housing?
I wouldn't know that.
You wouldn't know.
Honestly.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is, Mr. Willett. Thank you. Well, as you know, Mr. Black, we have a break during the morning. We'll take it now. We'll resume, please, at 11:30. And as with everyone else, and you will remember, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it while you're out of the room.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. 11:30, please. Thank you. Would you ask Mr. Black to come back in, please? Thank you. All right, Mr. Black. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Black, 16th of June 2017. Can I please take you to RBK 23238? This is the Gold Group meeting on that day, 16th June, the Friday, 10 a.m. There's the action sheet. You can see who was present. You were present, as was John Barradell from LLAC. Do you remember him being there?
Yes.
You do. And if we go to page 2 of the action sheet, there are a number of updates there under the heading looking after those immediately affected. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it includes, in the second bullet point down, lack of clarity from the police regarding reoccupation. Staff are telling families from the finger blocks that they can stay in commercial accommodation until there is a clear message from the police. And then it goes on, underneath that, Treadgold House. This is 3 bullet points down. Treadgold House is still evacuated. Police are turning people away. Now, that suggests, I think, doesn't it, that there was some confusion at the time about reoccupation of the walkway properties. Is that right?
I would say that seems. I think it seems there's also confusion with the police and the link between the Gold Group and Beck. And I think I get some understanding that it's when police teams change and new commandos come in that you might have different views, and I think that was one of the frustrations in terms of actually the police saying different things. So I think that's a clear communication thing.
Right. Does that account, from your perspective, for the difference between this minute and the minute from the Gold meeting in the afternoon of the 15th of June, the day before, that we've just seen, that the 3 walkway blocks would be reoccupied that night?
Yeah.
Yes. Can we look at TMO 100333755? This is an email thread between various TMO staff internally. And if you go, please, to the foot of page 1, you can see this one from Mandy Warrior to Nicola Wilkinson at 11:58 on the 16th of June 2017. This is just after the Gold Group meeting of that morning. Hi, Nicola, it says. The TMO are on our way to door knock the estate as the residents have been told they can now return after being evacuated following fire at Grenfell Tower. As you know, the blocks on the above estate do not have gas due to the central boiler at Grenfell Tower for the estate being damaged. As you are aware, we are looking to install a temp boiler, but we do not have a timescale yet. Is it right to say that as far as the TMO was concerned, evacuated residents were able to and were returning on the 16th of June to their homes, other than perhaps Grenfell Walk?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you understand yourself that the decision that evacuated residents could return home was a decision made by the police or by RBKC or jointly between the two?
I imagine it'd be jointly between the two.
Do you know?
I mean, I imagine that the Gold Group was making those sort of decisions alongside Beck, so it would just be my impression.
And you attribute us, I think you told us, the confusion as appears from the minutes to one of police shifts changing and not being properly updated by the Beck.
Yeah, I think that was sometimes. I can't say that it's all the time, but I think...
Was that speculation on your part, or is that something you...
No, I think that was some of the... In terms of we had meetings that Teresa or some of her team fed that back to us.
Now, if we go back to the action sheet, please, RBK 3023238, page 2, just below the reference to Treadgold, you see it says 15 people stayed at the rest centre last night. So that's even fewer than the 25 we saw on the first night, the night of the 14th, 15th. And this is now 15th, 16th. It says, LJ confirmed she had sufficient hotels to accommodate up to 20 families. She will house families that are vulnerable or those with children that have no hot water, but others will have to manage. Now, do you accept, looking at that message, at least, that by the morning of the 16th of June, there were still evacuated residents, families with children, vulnerable people, older people, that had still not been provided with emergency accommodation?
It would appear so, yeah.
Yes. And is that because the TMO had not been able to identify all of those residents who met that criterion, or hadn't signposted them to RBKC?
I can't recall.
Did you challenge the approach that only certain people would be accommodated and that, as this note says, others will have to manage?
No.
Why not?
Because I was listening to the Gold Group talking about how they were managing a situation. In a sense, I'm sitting on the sideline, and they're having to make those decisions in terms of actually the resources they have.
But you're not sitting on the sidelines in practice, are you? Because you are, the TMO is the body that would actually have to tell people that they would have to manage and cope with how they would manage.
Yeah,
No?
and I think that was, when they made those decisions, that's how we explained it to people.
Right. But I mean, is it right? I mean, did you get the sense at the time that when Laura Johnson took the view that others would have to manage, she was basically putting the problem on your shoulders?
I accept some of that, yes.
Then if you go to page 4 in this document, under resources for the next 3 days and 14 days, you see the heading there. It says, in the last bullet point, all asked to identify what resources they need in the next 48 hours. Did you identify what resources the TMO needed for the next 48 hours?
I can't recall specifically, but we would have been working on sort of staffing for the weekend in terms of shifts for that.
Yes, and on that point, let's go then to, well, but before I do, did you have any worries at that stage about whether the TMO had the capacity to fulfil its role at that point?
I think we were addressing shortages as best as we could.
Let's go to RBK 30010176. The second email down on the page. This is an email from Barbara Brownlee at Westminster City Council internally on the 16th of June at 11:51. So this is at sometime later that morning. There are currently unofficial calls for assistance coming from KNC's TMO for help. They've used WhatsApp to send out a message to some London councils saying that their staff are exhausted and they need resources on for the weekend. Is that so? Did you?
I'm not sure about the WhatsApp messages to the local authority. I'm clear about working with Campbell to Kell to seek resources in another way.
Right. You say you're not sure about the WhatsApp messages. To your knowledge, were your staff sending out messages, whether by WhatsApp or otherwise, to other London councils saying that their staff are exhausted and they need resources for the weekend?
I can't recall that, no.
Why is that? I mean, can we work on the basis that, given your high-level coordination role, this is something you would have known if that system was working properly?
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought I would have known because, but I can't recall who. It doesn't tell me who was doing it, you know, which member of staff or what I'm clear about is what I was doing on the other aspect to actually access support for our services.
Was it a fact that your staff were exhausted and need resources on for the weekend?
I think everybody was exhausted and people were working as hard as they could.
Just help me with this, Mr. Black. A call for assistance, whether unofficial or made by WhatsApp or whatever, wouldn't just be made by people on their own initiative. They'd be made by senior members of staff, wouldn't they?
Well, that's what I've thought, but I can't recall. I don't remember doing it. I have no record of me doing it. So therefore, you know, Barbara Brownlee, I don't know what she got or where she got it from. And
you're not aware of any other members of your more senior staff taking that course?
Well, not off the top of the head that I've been able to see.
Right. Thank you.
And it goes on. I also now have emails from housing consultancies saying the same thing. This is a disorganised and very unofficial way to raise help after we have been offering it since the very beginning. Were you aware that Westminster Council, for its own part, had been offering support to your staff in the TMO?
No.
From the very beginning? Not aware?
Not aware.
And then she says, I'm concerned that too many inexperienced staff will descend upon the respite centres without any planning and simply make the situation worse. From what you could observe at the time, was that a legitimate concern?
No, I think it was the other way, that we were working to use the resources of other organisations to backfill our staff so that they could actually work at the respite centres with that local knowledge. Now, I mean, for the record, Barbara Brownlee never contacted me about this at any time, and I'm quite surprised to see this. Right.
Well, let's just look at the top of the email run, because we can see what happens to it. The next email up, you can just see it, there it is, that's better, comes from Mick Smith at Westminster City Council through to the Beck. You see, at 12:26, FAO, Stuart Priestley, following my call to him, see below that has come from our Director of Housing that requires passing on to your Housing Director for action. And then that goes from the Beck to Laura Johnson, copied to Stuart Priestley a few minutes later. You see that?
Yeah.
So it definitely goes to Laura. Did Laura Johnson share this message with you?
I don't recall seeing it or being told about it.
Right. Did she share the gist of the communication with you?
I don't recall that, no.
Let's go to RBK 401923. Now, you referred in your evidence earlier this morning to Radoika. If we go to page 2, the bottom of the thread, you can see an email from Radoika Miljevic at Campbell Tickle. And she says, we've had a call from the TMO this morning. And sorry, I should show you the date. It's 19th of June at 10:45. That's the Monday morning. We've had a call from the TMO this morning regarding quite a considerable input of staff resources that they are requesting. Some people have not turned up for work today. Whilst we've been looking at how we might backfill the foremost senior posts, at least temporarily, it doesn't seem appropriate to be trying to fill all the other resource gaps appearing, and we assume that in any case this is best done through the command centre. Doubtless there'll be some thinking going on about how these services are managed in any case in the long run, but please could you advise on how best we help the TMO plug into the support arrangements being put in place for now, and whether indeed they should. And then there's a link, and then it says the resource request being reported to us this morning is 5 housing officers, 2 team leaders in housing, 1 customer call centre team leader and 2 handlers. And then there's a last paragraph that you can see there. Were you the person who made the request for staff resources through Campbell Tickle?
We were working with Campbell Tickle, who were asking us what resources we required, and because, as I said earlier, they were getting offers of help from other housing organisations. Yeah. And in the sense, we were providing with lists of staff in terms of, you see here, seeking if they could help us.
Yes, but were you the person who made the request? Were you the person who made the call to the TMO? From the TMO to Radoika Miljevic?
I can't recall whether it was me or one. It might have been Sasha.
But did you authorise it?
I would have authorised it, yes.
So you knew it was going on?
Yeah.
Right. Why did you make the request, or why did you cause this request to be made through Campbell Tickle, rather than raising it at an RBKC Gold Group meeting and asking Gold for resources?
I think... I don't know. Really.
Right.
I got the sense that there weren't resources available for us, and therefore actually we were left to actually fill our own.
Now, by this stage, this is Monday, the previous Friday afternoon of the 16th of June, London Local Authority Gold had taken over.
Yeah.
Why were you still pursuing taking on more housing staff through Campbell Tickle as opposed simply to pursuing that through London Gold?
Maybe I didn't realise they would supply the resources.
Did you not think to ask, at least?
I think at that time, probably not.
Going back to the email thread, can we then look further up the chain, please, page 1, and you can see that the email is forwarded by Barbara Brownlee at the bottom of your screen on the 19th to Amanda Johnson at RBKC Housing. Hi both, just to put on your radar that the TMO are requesting resources from specific places, but we need to coordinate this via London-wide, and please will you investigate when you are over there. and then that message is replied to by Amanda Johnson the next day, 24 hours later. And it says, Barbara, at this morning's meeting, you explained that resources would not be made available to support the TMO in terms of housing management staff. The TMO is now struggling to mobilise staff to support people back into their homes. I am clarifying the number of staff that have not attended work today. Staff are extremely frightened, and the lack of staff will significantly undermine our ability to get people back into their homes, accelerating already heightened tensions. The London-wide response has been extremely helpful in supporting our BKC, and I'm struggling to see why this cannot be extended to the TMO, as there is a direct impact on our tenants and staff safety. Were you aware, just at this point, that the London Gold Response Team, London-wide, was not going to make resources at that point available to support the TMO?
No. We just got on with doing the job we thought the best could do.
Had you had any discussions with RBKC about RBKC approaching London Gold and seeing if London Gold would be able to help you with your staff problem?
I can't recall, to be honest.
Were you involved with any discussions with London Gold's response team directly about your problem with staffing?
No.
Can you explain why, given the problems that you were having, you either didn't seek the assistance of London-wide Gold, or as is said here, the London-wide response, or raise with RBKC whether or not London Gold could come in and help?
I just had an impression that they wouldn't help us.
Why? Why did you have that impression?
I think London Gold's a bit like a juggernaut. Once it comes in, it goes over. They understand local authorities and maybe didn't understand my organisation and how we're structured and operated differently. And in a sense, as it evolved, maybe not appreciated. But again, that's, you know, when you look back, I think that's a fair point for you to raise with me.
Looking at it slightly differently, did you have any working knowledge, I think that's the best one could expect, of the pan-London resilience arrangements and London Gold's powers and capabilities in particular?
Not really.
Why is that? Is that because you weren't a Category 1 responder?
I think so, yes.
Right. Did you ever have any discussions with RBKC about what you needed to know in that respect?
Not as far as I can recall.
Let's move then, now I think back a day to the 19th of June 2017. This is the Monday. There was an RBKC Gold Group meeting on that day at noon. Action sheet at RBK 405507. Page 1 shows that you attended. It's in a slightly different format. This is now in a grid format. You attended with Councillor Nicholas Paget-Brown, the leader. If you go to page 2, in the left-hand column, there's a subject, housing, and the first bullet point there, RBKC housing staff are fatigued. They are the only ones who know the borough and have local knowledge. You see that? Mm-hmm. And then 4 bullet points up from the bottom, it says, people in finger blocks constantly approaching for housing need a steer from the WCC team. What do we do with the 91 families not from Grenfell Tower and Walk? And then if you turn to page 3, under the TMO, in the left-hand column, third bullet point down, it says, need instructions sent from Barbara Branley about no longer placing residents from the finger blocks. Staff are nervous and some have not come in today. Now, is it right to say, because here we are on the 19th of June, halfway through that day, that even then there was confusion and an unclear strategy about arrangements for evacuated residents?
Yes.
Yes. Why? Why as late as this?
I think they were just finding it incredibly difficult, and it wasn't as simple as it seemed. I mean, it's 850 people trying to meet their different needs.
And why was a steer needed from the WCC team, the Westminster City Council team? What could they add?
Well, I think they were the ones that were brought in London Gold to oversee the support, so it sounds like we needed them to give the steer.
Right. And was Barbara Branley, were you in touch with Barbara Branley?
No, I don't think she was at this meeting. I don't know if she attended any Gold meeting.
No, but given that she was head of housing at Westminster City Council, Am I right that Westminster City Council didn't have a TMO in the way that RBKC did?
They had an ALMO,
An ALMO.
management organisation.
Right. Did you have discussions with their head of ALMO?
No.
No. So it was did you yourself or your organisation, TMO, have any dealings at all with Westminster City Council, or was that all left to Laura Johnson and her team?
Most of it was left to Laura Johnson. Where we engage with them is when they were brought in to review certain aspects around the boiler, etc. So my team was engaging with them.
Now, if we go to your fourth statement, please, page 8, paragraph 30. You say there, I'm unable to recall precisely what was meant by this, and you're referring there to the bullet point I just put to you about instructions sent from Barbara Brownlee. I know that there were a number of residents from the finger blocks in the rest centres that needed to be rehoused. I think we wanted to know what to do with the finger blocks, as they were without services for a period of time, and Teresa and her team needed instructions on how to proceed. Instructions from Barbara Brownlee, was that because she was basically London Gold Housing and therefore in charge?
Yes.
I follow. Were you ever told, either on or around the 19th of June, by John Barradell, who was leading the gold response and had been since the Friday afternoon, the 16th, that a decision had been made at a central government level that evacuated residents were entitled to hotel accommodation and financial assistance?
No, I can't recall that.
It's something you would recall, though. Had that been communicated to you, presumably?
I can't recall if there's a minute in the gold meeting where it said. I don't think I had a one-to-one meeting with him during the whole process.
Right. I would put it this way. If central government had come in and told you that all evacuated residents were entitled to hotel accommodation and financial assistance, would I be right in thinking that that is something that you would recall because it would have solved all your problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think government comes in and says those things, and then I think there's a big, certainly with Laura mentioned, just about how you were to achieve it within that time. Well, it's very much a local authority to go to government discussions, which I wasn't involved in.
Looking at it in the round, how would you characterise the clarity of instruction, guidance, direction coming from RBKC, and then after the Friday, London Gold, about what was to be done about evacuated residents over the course of the first week of the fire, or following the 16th of June at least?
I mean, I think it got a bit clearer in terms of but it was still confusing sometimes in terms of actually the whole situation.
To what would you attribute the confusion?
A chaotic and difficult situation that, even though you had this structure, it was still difficult to get clear instructions all the way down the line. I think that's something they would learn from. And in your perception, was that because people didn't understand how to work the structure, or because there was some defect in the structure? I think it was probably about, I think probably the structure works on paper. It's about whether when you have something this size, you actually need more from central government. Is there enough resources put in at that level in a helpful way, rather than just instructions of what you're to achieve? Then, moving to the 20th of June, the Tuesday, there was an RBKC Gold Group meeting on that day. You attended. Action sheet at 100 TMO 100334447. There it is. You're in attendance with Barry Quirk from Lewisham. Page 3, please. TMO section on the left-hand side, top of page. You can see that in the first bullet point, it says residents coming back from their homes in the finger blocks to the WSC because of mixed messages. Concern being raised by Councillor Judith Blakeman, JB, and police, who seem to be saying, return at your own risk, which is not helpful. JB asking for a copy of the risk assessments which agreed this. So is it right, looking at this, it appears to be, that even at 20th of June, so 6 days after the fire, there was still no clear communication or strategy in respect of evacuated residents? It would appear that, yeah. And if you go to your third statement, please,
page 2, paragraph 8, you say, "It was made very plain to me at Gold Group that all internal and external communications, including communications with evacuees and residents, were required to be controlled and managed by RBKC through the Gold Group in line with its emergency planning procedures. TMA was specifically prohibited from communicating with residents and any other parties unless authorised by RBKC." And you expand on that in your fourth statement. If we go to that, please, page 5. Paragraph 18. And you say there, "The need to manage communications to ensure there were clear and consistent messages being given was discussed at the Gold Group meetings on several occasions. For instance, I've been shown the action sheet for the Gold Group meeting on 26th June 2017, enclosed at document, and then you exhibit it, where the importance of a centralised message was discussed, it being agreed that all communications were to be referred to Patrick Carr." Now, in the light of that, paragraph 20, a little bit lower down, bottom of your screen, you say, "I believe that the decision to manage all communications through Gold Group was taken in order to ensure all communications were accurate and consistent so as to avoid confusion. In the light of that apparent commitment to clear communication, were you not concerned that the inconsistent and confusing communications relating to evacuated residents, particularly from the finger blocks, had persisted throughout the week and still persisted as at the 20th of June, the Tuesday?"
Yes.
Yes. Did you raise that as a concern at Gold Group meetings?
I can't recall. I know we did raise concerns around communications generally because, in a sense, they were very slow in agreeing sort of an overall position so you could send information out to residents. I think that was a reflection that initially there was a very few comms people in RBKC, and I think the new person that came in from London Gold brought in some other people to move it along.
If we go back to the action sheet, please, where we were, which was on page 3, it goes on, as I've shown you in the last sentence of the first bullet point, that Judith Blakeman had asked for a copy of the risk assessment. Now, you cover this in your fourth statement, where you say that you had been told by Teresa Brown that she thought that risk assessments had been produced by the Gold Group, who were responsible for deciding that residents could return. That's what you say in paragraph 33 of your fourth statement. Given that it was you who was attending Gold Group meetings and not Teresa Brown, were any such risk assessments produced by the Gold Group before evacuees were told to return?
I can't recall that, no.
Did you see any?
I didn't see any, no.
Why did you not ask to see a risk assessment or to have one done?
I thought that was, if the Gold Group and Beck are making these decisions, they should be doing that. We weren't, in the sense it felt outside my control.
Given that it was a point being raised by the councillors, did you press, and given that you were resident-facing, did you in turn press RBKC's management to carry out a risk assessment so that you could reassure residents that there was no risk or a negligible risk or a manageable risk of them returning to their home in light of the police saying return at your own risk?
I can't recall that.
Right.
Well, I think in the sense we were having trouble with the police saying different things at different times.
Mr. Black, I get the impression from the last few answers that you understood that all your powers and responsibilities, at least in relation to the residents of the walkways and the tower and so on, had been, as it were, taken over by either by the council Gold Group or by the Pan London Gold Group, and had been taken out of your hands. Is that how you saw it?
Yes. So how I saw it, it was the whole of Lancaster West Estate, which is about 1,000 homes, really, that we had no influence from the night of the disaster, and that whole area was managed by by RBKC, then the Gold Group, then the London Group, and they operated the way they thought to manage it within that. Our role was sidelined in terms of support and where we could help out in terms of maintenance. Right. So those decisions were, in a sense, we saw that we had no role, no control, no influence in it.
And no responsibility either?
Well, in a sense, if they were taking all the decisions, I felt, how could we have responsibility with no role apart from where we were being asked to do things and trying to do that as best as possible?
And are you able to say what led you to that conclusion?
I think from day one, in terms of the disaster site and the cordon, is that we were, you know, as it evolved over the next few days, that basically our role was, I'm trying to think of a word, sorry, subordinate to anything that was going on there. In sense, we, you know, as a company, we lost that because of the disaster.
Right.
There was also some aspects of, you know, safety in terms of perception, and there were some, you know, risks and threats running about. So I think there's also, you know, a key thing of the RBKC, then Gold Group, trying to manage that as a collective as well.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Yep. Was there any discussion once Gold Group had taken over from the Friday afternoon, the 16th, of embedding a number of senior TMO staff within it so that they could assist internally within Gold Group with any particular issues about residents on the Lancaster West Estate?
No, I don't think so.
So what was envisaged by way of familiarity with the community when it came to London Gold?
I think London Gold felt that they needed to bring fresh people in, and I think if you follow these things through, they were talking about appointing the leader and bringing other staff, and that was the impression that, you know, they were just taking it over, and that was the end of the matter.
But that would have meant reinventing the wheel, wouldn't it? Because your staff had an intimate knowledge of the Lancaster West Estate, whereas Gold didn't. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think probably within their situation, they might have felt we're more a hindrance than a positive, and that's why they would want new faces.
Let's turn then to a different subject, which is the TMO's internal communications. Can we go to your fourth statement, please, page 5, paragraph 21. You say there, foot of the screen, following the Gold Group meetings, separate internal meetings would be called with the TMO senior management team and executive team to enable me to report back on any issues or actions identified. We would then discuss how these could be dealt with, and the actions would be assigned to a TMO staff member to manage the completion. Now, these meetings were, is this right, were with the senior management team and executive team, yes?
Yes.
And those were teams which Teresa Brown and her team were not part of?
They were part of that. I mean, Teresa was on the senior management team.
But her team wasn't?
But they could, in a sense, what we're trying to do, if Teresa felt that she needed more of her staff there to explain our situation, that was possible. It was a fluid situation between the senior managers.
Right. Now, in respect of the meetings with the senior leadership team and executive team, you say in paragraph 21, if we just go back to that, top of the screen, after every meeting, Jill Petford, my PA, then compiled notes, and you provide an example of that. And at paragraph 23, you say this: I maintained oversight that the assigned actions were delivered through the same process. Updates on completed and outstanding actions were provided by attendees at each meeting so that we were able to monitor their progress. The actions were then recorded on a spreadsheet together with an overview of the current position, and that this then formed the basis of my updates to the Gold Group. For example, see the minutes of the TMO meeting on the 22nd of June 2017, which was subsequently updated to reflect the current position of each action. Now, I think you've only exhibited one set of notes, and that was from a meeting, as you say, on the 22nd of June. We've been unable to identify any others. Was that the first time such a meeting took place in that way, with a record being kept of the meeting?
And what date is this again, sorry?
22nd of June.
No, I think we would have had more before that, because we had, as I said, concert meetings after the Gold Group and meetings together, and they were collected by Jill, who was my PA.
Right. And was Teresa Brown present at each of these meetings?
I imagine so, if she was available.
Right. And were you confident that you had a clear view, a clear understanding of the activities of your staff delivering the frontline response in the first week?
I felt I had as good a view as I could do.
I mean, looking back on it, was there anything that you didn't know but your teams on the ground did, which you should have known?
Well, I think I should have probably have a better understanding of how they were collecting information and how they were sharing that with the council. That was done very much at a local level. I think I tried through that process to be on top of things, but there were also so many other things going on at the same time. It was quite challenging.
Now, I want to ask you some questions next about the observations of others about the TMO's performance in the first week after the fire. And I'm going to start with the BEIS. If we go, please, to BEI 402849, we see a witness statement.
Can you confirm what BESI stands for, sir?
Yes, that's it's the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So it's a government department. And this is the second witness statement of Sebastian Bassett James, who was an assistant director in that department when he made the statement. And he explains that at the time of the fire, he held the position of assistant director, head of no-deal contingency operations for Operation Yellowhammer at the Cabinet Office, and his role had then changed. So that's who he is. If we go in this statement to page 4, please, paragraph 15, we see in it that he says this. Whilst BEIS and the TMO both had representatives present at the Westway Centre, the representatives from TMO at the Westway Centre did not have the necessary authority to make decisions, authorise actions, or respond to the queries that the Utilities Coordination Cell sought to address. Is that correct?
Well, first of all, it's the first I heard of this person yesterday when you were speaking to Teresa. I had never any meeting with this man, and this is the first time I've seen or heard this.
Right.
Well, apart from yesterday.
That may be, but is it the case? Is it a fact that those at the TMO didn't have the necessary authority to make decisions, authorise actions, or respond?
I wouldn't agree that, because I don't know what the decisions or actions they were being asked to make by this man.
So did anybody come to you and say, we'd like to do something, but we don't have the power? Did you recall that ever happening?
No, this person didn't give feedback, as far as I can tell, to any of us that there was a problem. We had, as well as the staff on the ground, because I think it talks about gas coordination later, so I don't know about that. We had our asset management team who were there to help people.
Now, if you look at the bottom of the screen, bottom of the page, he says, members of the Utilities Coordination Cell, just pausing there, were you familiar with what that was?
No.
Had you ever heard of it?
No.
Sitting here now, before I've just shown you this statement, have you ever heard of it?
I only heard about it yesterday because I was listening to Teresa and your evidence.
Right. He goes on, as we can see, members of the Utilities Coordination Cell tried to make contact with various direct landline and mobile telephone numbers for specific contacts at the TMO, provided by contacts within BEIS and Cadent Gas Network, as well as the public-facing telephone numbers for the TMO. These telephone calls went unanswered, and even when voicemail messages were left, were not returned to my knowledge. And if we continue at paragraph 20 on page 5, he says, by 21st June, we still had no direct contact with the TMO. And then he goes on, in the 4 lines up from the end of the paragraph. By this stage, we were working with DEFRA and DCLG to try to identify a point of contact in the TMO. Contact was finally made by DCLG after a few days, who were then able to update both DEFRA and the Utilities Coordination Cell. First, do you recall anybody at central government, whether it's DEFRA or whether it's BEIS or DCLG, attempting to identify a point of contact in the TMO?
Not as far as I'm aware. Right. I can't see why if they were linked in at a strategic and national level and linked with gold, why they wouldn't be able to get contact numbers with us.
Right. Is this the first time you've ever heard of this complaint or problem?
Yes, I think I think that's what's confusing about this. I haven't heard of them. I hadn't heard about the complaint. No one had contacted me. We were contactable. I don't know who they were phoning.
Now, he goes on at paragraph 21 to say that the Utilities Coordination Cell's role was to provide support and reassurance to victims and residents who had suffered through this incident, taking on as much of the administrative and communication burden as possible to help resolve their issues quickly and effectively. As we were unable to get answers from or help progress actions through the TMO, we were unable to fulfil our primary role. We could still take steps to assist victims and residents, but could not complete those tasks, which were most important to us. In my opinion, this led to the victims and residents being left frustrated for a longer period than necessary. Do you have any response to what he says there?
I just find it incredibly difficult that a man's going away and written this months after, but I have no knowledge of it. I don't believe who he contacted. Right. So really confused. So
did anybody, once contact was made, of course I can't assist you with when that was, come to you and tell you that the Utilities Coordination Cell had been trying to get hold of your staff and had failed, and
no.
There was a problem as a result?
No.
Let's turn next then to central government and London Gold. Can we look please at CAB 405909? This is an email, or email run between a number of officials at number 10 Downing Street. And if we start at page 1 on the second half of the page, we can see that there is an email from Chris Gray, the Assistant Secretary to the Prime Minister, to the other number 10 staff, dated the 20th of June at 1844, and a number of updates are provided. And if you go to the top of page 2, there's a heading, Rehousing, and it says, under that, the first bullet point, 109 households from cordoned area, but not tower block. What happens to these people? Currently no commitment to rehouse, and CLG/GC expect many to refuse to go back. Lots of work to be done on houses, including on hot water. MOD have no solutions, so Gold looking at commercial solutions doesn't sound promising. And there's a reply to that. If you go up the page to page 1, top of the page, it comes from Jamie Cowling. It's the second email down, 21st of June at 09:29, back to Chris Gray and Lorna Grattan at number 10, and also to Alistair Whitehead, who was the PPS to the Prime Minister at the time. Chris, just to add, the feedback from the residents that I've been speaking to is that rehousing the households from the cordoned area, but not Grenfell Tower, is becoming pressing. They understand that there is an investigation ongoing, but would like to know when repairs and cleaning will start. It's obviously a difficult situation, but the TMO don't appear to be handling comms particularly well. Now, you deal with this to some extent in your third statement. Let's go to that. Page 2, paragraph 8. You say there, it was made very plain to me at Gold Group, and we've read this before, all internal and external communications. Now, we've seen that. Now, in light of what you say there, what do you say about Jamie Cowling's email that the TMO don't appear to be handling comms well?
Well, so I'd say to Jamie that, did he know what he was doing? Did he know who to speak to? Did he understand the Gold command? It just seems, again, number 10 made a few interventions at a number of levels, and they want to drop people in it. I find it, we weren't in control of comms. We weren't allowed to put things out without approval from, first of all, RBKC, then the Gold Group. So we weren't running a separate comms thing to pick up anything Jamie was saying. And I think if he was engaged with the rescue office and the people that were from the Gold Command, they might understand that. And I suppose this is just but this time you've got number 10 waiting about, trying to shut down companies, get rid of people, because that's the way they deal with things. They didn't understand as a company. onto my board all the time trying to say you have to wind yourself up without them having any understanding of the structure of the company. I mean, it was a bullying exercise, not a supportive exercise, and I think this reflects sometimes the stuff going behind the scenes that I don't know about.
Well, you may have the same answer to my next piece of evidence, but let's see. Go back to the email run, please, which is Chris Gray's reply to Jamie Cowling at the top of the screen, 21st of June at 9:38. A copy to the same copy ease. That was another piece of feedback yesterday. TMO remained terrible. Gold Command doing what they can. CLG working very quickly with SOS on how they can remove TMO from the situation, and hope to have an answer in days. Inevitable difficulties raised around contracts, etc. Were you aware at the time that within number 10 there were discussions of this nature about the TMO's role and the proposal to remove it from the situation?
So I didn't have a link to number 10, so no. So I imagine what we know is number 10 contacted us a number of times to try to get rid of us without understanding that we have a board, to engage with our board, the structure of the company, and it's not as simple as that. And also, the other thing is, did you really want the TMO to be got rid of? Because actually part of this inquiry is about holding the TMO to account. So for me, it's mixed messages. It's government acting as it does, trashing everybody else without actually giving them a chance to address it. And it was easy at that time to slag us off, as this does. They don't have to communicate with us. They can do this all behind our back.
Well, this is internal, of course, but, as a matter of fact, did anybody in central government, did anybody at number 10, did anybody in the Cabinet Office make or seek to make any contact with you personally to put these points to you?
No.
Now, let's go to CLG 405723. This is an email chain within the DCLG entitled TMO Meeting. And if we go, please, to the bottom of the thread at page 2, this is an email from Melanie Dawes on the 20th of June 2017 at 10:13, subject TMO meeting, all, and then it has agreed actions on the TMO point, and then the second bullet point is Sally to talk to Barbara about intel on the ground of what she wants out of the TMO. Now, of course, you're not remotely copied in on this, but we can see it. And it goes on to say, I'm sorry, that's what that says there. And we can see the reply up the chain, please, on page 1. And the Barbara, as we can see, is Barbara Brownlee. And this is the email back from Sally Randall, who was one of the addressees of Melanie Dawes' email, back to Melanie Dawes' office. And it says this: spoke to Barbara Brownlee, impression of what's going on. TMO has no leadership. Everyone, including KNC, is dithering. TMO staff are drifting around, traumatised. Rumours that some are cleaning computer records. Staff preoccupied with likelihood of criminal charges. No one is taking care of the staff. A handful are trying to do the job, but are still very traumatised and working with no leadership. They cannot get reliable information, e.g. on the state of the finger blocks. And then one of her people visited finger blocks with local maintenance person. Works could be done in 2 to 3 weeks, but more likely to take 2 to 3 months, given no leadership or urgency. It quotes, if this was an RP, the regulator would have had a new chief exec in on day 2. And I think RP, I'm assuming, means regulated person.
No, registered provider.
Okay, thank you. Right. But now, I've shown you a block of quite miserable reading there, which I showed Teresa Brown yesterday. Were you yourself aware that each or all of the concerns being expressed here about the TMO were being discussed at this level within the senior-most department on the minister's side at the DCLG?
No.
Did anyone like Barbara Brownlee pick up the phone to you or send you a message and raise these concerns with you directly?
No, but it sounds like Barbara's quite happy sending emails around criticising rather than contacting us.
Right. are you able to account for why there was such a poor impression, at least in the mind of Barbara Brownlee, communicated to senior government about the TMO's performance in the immediate aftermath?
I don't know Barbara Brownlee. I can't get into her head at that time. She obviously, reading this, wanted rid of the TMO without a clear understanding of what the TMO was in terms of company, the shape of it, and the rules and regulations. She didn't speak to us. She didn't speak to my board. She didn't raise these issues through the goal group with us. You know, for what I can see, you know, there's a conversation going on high above us, which is all sort of fitting in with the leadership that was put in without understanding the trouble we were having. And, you know, I suppose it's easy for these people to say it was easy to do, but I challenge these thoughts.
Well, looking at the bullet points I've read to you, are any of them factually correct?
Are any of them factually correct?
Yes, so let's start. Let's start with TMO has no leadership, everyone, including KNC, is dithering. Was there a sense of dither and delay in the TMO and the council?
No, I think, you know, we were managing a difficult situation and working with RBKC. The dithering, I don't know what that is in terms of actually what we're supposed to do. In terms of leadership, we had senior managers on the ground supporting people, but sometimes it took people, because Sasha was on holiday, so she didn't get back until halfway through this. I find it quite hard to read, and I don't accept it all. I think what I will have to accept in terms of the list, reliable information, you know, but I think that just reflected the situation we were in.
But it was correct, I think, wasn't it, as we've seen, at least according to the 5th bullet point, that they, that is, to TMO, cannot get reliable information on the state of the finger blocks.
Well, I accept that, yeah.
Now, the email continues at the foot, after the reference in the 1st bullet point above that to a new strong chief exec who can provide a single point of liaison, clear information and strong leadership. It says Campbell Tickell has spoken to BB, Barbara Brownlee, to let her know that the TMO have approached them for an interim chief executive. We have also heard this. Did you know anything of that?
Yes.
You did? What's that about?
This is the 20th of, I think we were having issues that how the TMO could go forward. So at that stage, we don't manage Lanc West, we still manage 9,000 homes, so the board had discussions about the future of the organisation, as I think is their responsibility.
So you knew that the TMO was looking for an interim chief executive, and that person not being you?
Yeah.
Right. So is this right? And who had told you that?
Who told me that? I'd sat down with my book. So there was a number of issues alongside this as a company, in terms of as we were spending money to manage things, there came a point where the board had to be clear about would it be able to be supported financially, or what they couldn't do was trade illegally because you don't have the money, because we're on a fixed contract price with the council. So there was discussions around this, because in a sense what we required was RBKC to provide cover so that we could actually continue to contribute to the whole disaster and manage the house and stock. And we came to, with my board, a decision that I would step aside if that helped the situation to secure the financial future of the TMO. So I was aware of the discussion with my board. It's something I agreed with, and that was the situation. Did anyone within the TMO, the board in particular, raise concerns with you about your leadership in the immediate aftermath of the fire? No. Did John Barradell or anybody else from his team at London Gold raise concerns directly with you about your leadership or about the condition of your staff as per this email? No. Were you aware that John Barradell had raised concerns about the TMO's performance at the Prime Minister chaired Grenfell Tower Recovery Task Force ministerial meeting? No. On the 20th? No.
Dame Melanie Dawes' impression, according to her statement at paragraph 102, is that the leadership team of the TMO did not appear to be functioning at all. That's her impression. Are you able to account for how she gained that impression?
I don't know. Again, I didn't meet her. I don't think she came to visit us or talk to us or talk to my board. So again, I think people get these impressions by not engaging with my company or its board, and it suited their narrative to get rid of the TMO. So, you know, it's bury bad news and bury it on the TMO.
Did Laura Johnson or anybody at all from the council come to you and raise concerns such as those expressed here or expressed by Melanie Dawes about your leadership or about your staff?
No.
Now, one of the key roles that Teresa Brown and her team were undertaking was maintaining a list of safe and missing residents, yes?
Yes.
And one of the purposes of that list was to identify those who were safe in order to be able to inform RBKC who it was who needed support and who needed emergency accommodation, yes?
Yes.
Yes. From your recollection, was it right that RBKC was relying on the list of residents as maintained by the TMO, yes?
I think they had to, because in a sense we had the housing management system, so that's where we got the information from.
Yes. Did you have any concerns about the reliability of the initial tenant list that the safe and missing list was based on, namely the IT records, the database?
No, the actual tenancy and the leaseholders would be complete, because that's there. It's the information beyond that could vary depending on what we knew about the tenant or leaseholders.
Did you have any concerns about the reliability of the safe and missing lists created on the 14th, 15th of June, given the way the information was collated, namely scraps of paper, manuscript records collected at the various rest centres and then pulled into a spreadsheet?
I didn't at the time, but having listened to sort of Teresa's evidence yesterday, I've become very aware that actually there were mistakes made and people faced being given terrible news because we'd done it incorrectly or not identified mistakes. Right. So I'll have to take, in terms of as a company, we have to accept that was our responsibility and we failed to do it correctly.
Are you able to tell us why TMO staff relatively junior, not in the senior leadership or in the executive positions at TMO, were left to conduct that role, carry out that role?
Well, I think that was their job. That's what they did. They maintained, the housing management team maintained the housing records on that system. So they were the ones that actually used it all the time, knew how it worked, knew how to put the information on. So it was appropriate from Teresa and our team leaders that they were the ones working to pull it together, using both local knowledge and what was on the system.
Did you ever push the problem about maintaining these lists back to RBKC on the basis that they were ultimately responsible for the management of the lists as Category 1 responders?
I don't think I did at that time, because I saw it as part of our to provide them with information. In retrospect, that may have been the better thing to do.
Right. Now, one of the other key roles Teresa Brown and her team were involved in was identifying displaced residents from evacuated properties and facilitating their return. And you've yourself mentioned the number of 840 or so affected residents. Why did you consider it appropriate for your staff to be undertaking such a significant role?
I think because we were asked to, and because we managed the property previously. I think.
Did it occur to you to push back the problem to the council and then after Friday the 16th to London Gold and tell them that that's their job from then on?
I didn't think that. I mean, if again, respectfully, that might have been the better thing to do. At the time, my feeling was that we could help and support and provide the service that was required.
But what training did your staff have to be involved so integrally with such a central part of a mass displacement event?
Well, I think very few people had experience or training in that across most of the companies I know, because the disaster we had is beyond most people's comprehension of what we planned for.
Looking back on it, was the TMO's performance adversely affected perhaps by a lack of staffing capacity, a lack of resources, or expertise?
I think eventually resources we should have, we've gone through this narrative that I should have pushed more for Gold to include us if that was impossible. I think our staff did their best in difficult circumstances. And I think you learn from these experiences in terms of actually what's the capacity of your organisation and when you need more help.
Well, on the subject of learning, let's look, please, at your fourth statement, page 9, paragraph 34. The question above paragraph 34 is this. In your view, did the TMO receive appropriate support from RBKC to fulfil its role, for example, in facilitating the return of evacuated residents and the work at rest centres and the Westway Centre? So it's a question asking for your own view. And you say at paragraph 34, I believe so. It is difficult now to piece together everything that we and RBKC were doing, but my perception at the time, which remains the same, was that everyone was trying their very best and were doing what they could to work collaboratively and in partnership. Now, that's a view that you expressed when you produced this witness statement, which, as we saw earlier, you did in December 2020. Is it a view you maintain today?
I think my views have evolved. I mean, having listened and seen other issues, I think my role should have been to ask for more support from Gold, or to be more engaged in it. And I feel that's one of the reflections I've got to take away from here.
And does that tell us that you, at least in retrospect, were not adequately supported by London Gold in the aftermath?
Well, I think I thought for a bit before, but when you showed me these narratives from people who really weren't there to help us, I would say yes. I think they could have offered us more help. I think the decision was not to help us, not talk to us, to leave us, and we tried our best during incredibly difficult times to respond. If that was overconfident you could do, then that's again one of the things you find when you live through a disaster in terms of actually how much you can do.
And if we look at page 11 of the same statement, please, 2 pages on, paragraph 43, foot of the screen, the question is, what were your observations of RBKC's response to the Grenfell Tower fire in terms of the provision of emergency relief? And your answer at paragraph 43 was, my observation was that RBKC did everything they could in an extremely difficult situation. All of their staff at all levels worked incredibly hard to provide support in partnership with the TMO. Now, again, looking back on it now, is that a view you maintain still today?
Well, my view is I still think all the staff worked as hard as they could. I think probably, looking back at it, that RBKC should have maybe reached out to get more support in more quicker and even bigger than they did. I think that's just in terms of actually the way the disaster sort of grew. So it wasn't like a disaster on day one, it continued for a number of reasons, and I think that challenged resources. And I think housing is incredibly difficult. It's not an easy one when people are made homeless to find them new homes.
And looking next, please, at page 12, there's a question at the top of the page. Same question, your observations of the intervention and response of London Local Authority Gold to the Grenfell Tower fire in terms of emergency relief. And you say, having thought about it, my view is that their involvement was positive in that they were able to provide additional resource at different levels to the emergency effort. The additional resource was welcome at that time, as those involved had been working non-stop for days. They brought a freshness and allowed those who'd been working long hours to recover and rest. Again, they tried their best in very difficult circumstances. Given the evidence you've given this morning about London Gold and its response and its relationship with the TMO during those days after the 16th of June, are you still of the views that you express at paragraph 44 that I've just read to you?
I think when I wrote this, that was my view. I think having been presented with correspondence, I think it reflects that as I've reflected since the fire, that the TMO was a bit cut off, and the narrative that you've shown me behind government was actually they didn't want to deal with us, or they just wanted rid of us without understanding us, wouldn't speak to us, wouldn't speak to my board, in a sense dealing with us so far away without any understanding of what we were doing or trying to do. So I would say my position has changed. I think they could have done more. I think they could have talked to us. I think when you bring people in and you've got whole number 10 talking about how you're behind your back, you might ask them what did they do apart from write reports and gossip.
Mr. Black, I've come to the end of my prepared questions. I may have some more questions for you,
Yeah.
either from my own preparations or from others. So I'm going to ask the Chairman for the usual break at this point.
Yes, well, you know now from your previous experience, Mr. Black, that at this point we have to have a short break. Do you think 10 minutes or so will be enough, Mr. Millett?
It should be.
Well,
let's see, let's go with 10 minutes if we may.
I'm going to say that we'll come
back.
back at 10 to 1,
Okay.
and we'll see then if there are any questions. If Mr. Millett needs more time, he can let us know, and we could be a little longer. But we'll say 10 to 1, please.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Millett. 10 to 1, then, please.
Thank you.
Okay. Would you ask Mr. Black to come back in, please, Vicky? Right, Mr. Blackwell, we'll see if there are any more questions.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Yes, one or two, Mr. Chairman, there are. Can I ask you, please, to go to RBK 401095? Now, this is the management board meeting on the 14th of June at 11 a.m., at which you were in attendance. If you go, please, to page 3, you can see there that you were there's an update. If you see there, and in the last bullet point under the update from Robert Black, it says the board are to appoint a PR firm tonight to handle media and communications. Yes?
Yes.
Why did you consider it necessary to appoint a PR firm to handle media and communications?
So again, it was my board made a decision that after the fire we were overwhelmed with press, newspaper, TV requests outside our offices. It is beyond our... We had one comms person. It was beyond his skill. And the board felt, although it was down here as a PR firm, it's basically a crisis management firm, which basically we got one whole individual who'd experienced managing difficult situations, disasters, and the support of his company behind that. So in the sense it was to help us lift the burden, because we were just struggling, almost sort of being buried with the number of requests or people trying to get into our offices. It was nothing I'd ever experienced before.
In the bullet point second down within your update, you update the board and you say the building was totally refurbished a few years ago, including the windows, cladding and smoke dispersal unit. The works went through all the necessary processes and safety checks and were signed off by building control. There were no outstanding works. The next fire assessment was in July 2019. We will understand what happened once the immediate threat was over. Was that not the context for you appointing the PR firm?
No, so the context was explaining what had happened to the building, and then the next bullet points were just board decisions.
Did you have any personal role in the appointment?
No, they were appointed along with a set of lawyers by the time I came back from my meeting one day.
Right. Would you know when? Can you remember when?
It'd be quite soon after the fire, in terms of, because the board was meeting almost continuously, and they were trying to support our resident board members who were finding it incredibly difficult as well, and they were taking advice about, in the light of this disaster, what you need to be doing, how you need to manage the media and how you need to manage public inquiry and like going forward.
Right. Was the purpose, or one of the purposes of appointing a PR firm at this stage, to seek to preserve the TMO's reputation in light of the possible threats or claims or allegations being made about the refurbishment?
No, I don't think so. I think the appointment of the company was to deal with the onslaught of media and press inquiries at that situation. It wasn't about, the board wasn't at that stage thinking about the future. It was to deal with the here and now and the difficulties we're having sort of getting to our offices and and all that. I mean, it was, if you've ever been in something like it, it's beyond our skills, and this company managed to work with the media to give us a break, in a sense, in terms of to do comms to them or to let us get into our offices. It wasn't about anything else.
You see, some people might see this item here as the TMO prioritising the appointment of a PR firm to handle its reputation in the light of the potential allegations about the cladding at this stage, rather than helping the families. What would you say to that?
So I think there's two things, isn't it? I mean, the board has made the decision to help us manage the press. How we're helping the family was families are a completely different set of resources. So again, while people might have that view, that wasn't my board's view, and it wasn't my view. It's about how we can actually function with the level of press scrutiny we're getting, not just from the UK, but from across the world. And they were all camped outside our offices, and we just couldn't move. And that was the key focus of the board at that time, at that appointment.
Can we go to RBK 30200703? This is the Gold Group meeting we looked at earlier on the 16th of June, 10 a.m. And if you go to page 2, in that, you can see under the heading assisting the statutory authorities with their investigation, the first bullet point says RBKC have appointed lawyers, and then 4 bullet points down, TMO have appointed their own lawyers and are having to balance PR decisions with the legalities of the inquiry, been advised that the police could take their servers. Now, in appointing lawyers and in assuming that computers would be seized, was it clear that there was a massive problem that both RBKC and the TMO were simultaneously involved in, namely an accusation or allegation that it caused or had contributed to the fire?
No, I think the board appointed lawyers to help advise them and manage through this process, which was huge, and you recognise there would be a police inquiry because of death, and also probably, I can't remember, it was announced about a public inquiry at that time. So in a sense, it was there's another body to make sure we did the right thing, make sure we preserved our records, make sure there's no sort of that you could, basically it was all kept intact.
The underlying point that I'm really seeking to drive at here is this: did you at the time perceive, or did your board perceive, that there was an intrinsic problem, a conflict, if you like, between, on the one hand, the allegations of blame being laid at the TMO's door, on the one hand, but on the other hand, the TMO being involved simultaneously in the relief effort?
No, I don't think they saw a conflict. I think they saw it as completely different things. In the sense they saw us supporting a relief effort was what we should be doing, and secondly, as a board, they need to take instruction and advice from lawyers about how to go forward to make sure we do things properly.
And finally, Mr. Black, and it's a question we ask a number of witnesses, as I'm sure you know, looking back on it all, looking back on the entirety of the TMO's response to the aftermath and your own role in it, and the evidence that we've looked through this morning in particular, is there anything now that you think you should have done differently?
Well, I think I've made some comments when answering your questions, which I think that certainly around, in reflection and going through the evidence, that I should have maybe been more forceful at the Gold Group in terms of some of the issues we mentioned. I don't know if I wasn't because you were just so in shock with the thing or the structure that you didn't know how you fitted into it. But I certainly think now, because of my answers, I should have been more pushing on that. I think we should have asked for more resources and been direct to London Gold. And that may have stopped, may have helped the situation. I think the whole collection of information, although people tried their best, obviously wasn't as good as it should have been, and I apologise about what heartache that must have caused for people.
Thank you very much. Mr. Black, those are all the questions I have for you. It remains only for me to thank you very much for coming again to the inquiry and assisting us with our investigations. We're extremely grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Black is right that I should thank you as well on behalf of the panel. It's been your third appearance before us, and or at least before the inquiry. And we're grateful to you for coming yet again to tell us what you can tell us about this particular aspect of the whole affair. It's been very helpful to hear what you have to tell us, and we're grateful to you for coming. And now you are free to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Millett. We have another witness this afternoon, is that right?
We do. We have two witnesses this afternoon
witnesses
from the rest centres, and Mrs. Lamb will be conducting their examination.
Good. Thank you very much. Well, we'll do that then, please, at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock, please.